We're going to construct a T-halving joint, and the tools we will be using are as follows: a mallet for driving the chisels, a steel rule for measuring and using as a straight edge, a steel tape for measuring, a combination gauge which is a mortise gauge and a marking gauge, a tenon saw, and a set of beveled edged chisels of various sizes. This is the drawing of the halving joint, and this is the sizes that we will be working to. We have here two pieces of timber, and you can see now we are selecting which is going to be the face side and the face edge. The face side and the face edge are the two faces that we'll be working from, and we will be doing all the gauging and squaring in order for the lines to line up. We're finding now the centre portion of this, and it's 160, so we measure it at 70. We measure the width of the timber, which is 44, so from our centre point we now measure 22 millimetres, which indicates the edge of the timber. Now, using our square with the stock on the face edge, we square a line and replace the timber on, practically covering the line so we get a nice tight fitting joint. Once it's in position, we mark the other side, and with the square and the stock on the face edge again, we square a line across. Note the technique of putting your pencil on the line and sliding the square up to it. We're now squaring the lines along the edge, and we don't go all the way through, so we're just having a line on where we actually need it. The more lines we put on our timber, the more likely we are to cut to the wrong line or too deep. We now need to know how deep we're going to cut our housing. We're going to go halfway, so we measure that at 32, so half of 32 will be 16, and we set a marking gauge up to 16 millimetres. This allows us to put a scratch line on where we're going to cut to, or a gauge line as we call it. Another way we can do it is to set the marking gauge near enough to the centre, and then check it from each side and adjust it so it works out spot on in the middle. We're now lining in the gauge line so it highlights it so we can easily see where we're working to. If you note, we're actually gauging here by hand. It would be better if the piece of wood was in the vise, but it just means that the camera can pick it up better when it's on the bench. With both hands on the marking gauge, we have more control on the gauge, and you get a much straighter, crisper line. We're now marking the other piece out. It's the other piece of the joint, and we're putting a line across here which it doesn't technically need. But we're going to square the line all the way around, because the cutout for this will be on the back side. So the cutout for the first piece is coming out of the face, the cutout for this is coming out of the other side. The gauging is still done off the face side, so that the amount that we're taking out is the same amount as we are leaving on. And this action now concludes setting out the actual joint. We move on now to actually cutting the joint. By hatching in the area that's coming out, it makes it clearer as to which bit we are going to remove to stop us making any mistakes later on. Now we're going to cut this out using a tenon saw first of all to cut across the grain. And we draw the saw back round about 3 times to make a little nick in the corner of the timber, and this gives us a start for the saw. Then we run the saw back carefully along the line, leaving the line just on the edge of the timber. And we saw down there, and as soon as we get our little track, we remove our hand out of the way so that we cannot possibly cut it. Repeat on the other side. Now, if we have any knots or any awkward grain, sometimes we can cut another cut in the middle, which makes the timber break up just that little bit easier. We're now going to chisel out the centre portion of the joint. And note we're using the chisel the other way up so it breaks away easily and it doesn't tend to dig into the timber. Note we're taking a V shape out of the timber first, and then we will attempt to level off the bottom of the housing afterwards. And really we've got to go just halfway through, because we can break out the other side if we're not careful to lower level than we would desire. Bit of handwork here now, and note all the time we're using the chisel we are keeping both our hands behind the cutting edge. By doing this method we ensure that we do not cut ourselves accidentally, because chisels are very sharp tools, or they should be, and they can do a lot of damage. Just remove the bit of waste timber at the corner so the joint can go straight in. The bottom of the housing should now be perfectly level or just slightly hollow. We start off now by removing the other part of the housing joint, and we're going to cut a track down the top of the timber for approximately 6 millimeters. Note we're cutting on the waste side of the line, the side that has been hatched in. We cut down for 6 millimeters or approximately, and then we angle the timber over, and with the saw in the track that we've just cut, we start to cut along the line down up to our square line across the bottom. We repeat the action on the other side by turning the timber around, and then we remove the triangle in the middle. This means that the saw has a track at each side to go down, and we get a perfectly parallel joint. We now position the bench hook, and by putting the bench hook on the bench it means we can hold the timber there while we cut the shoulder of our joint. Again, just draw the saw back a couple of times, work along the line, and then remove the piece, taking care not to cut into the joint at the bottom. We now have both our joints formed, and we should be able to put the component together. Note how each piece is just a nice, tight, neat fit, and it is flush on the top and on the back.
A perfectly formed T halving joint.